take a break here in a minute, try and get this blocked in. And there's a little small shape right coming in there. You can see it's like a little dent. It's in between the two muscles of a little bit of light, almost like a highlight. Maybe I could include that in the drawing. Maybe I could not include it. Probably you could go either way. If I wanted to include that, which I'll get to in a little bit later, I would really start working up with my pencil the subtle halftones that are right next to it, and that'll project out that actual empty white paper to feel like it's a lighter light. So, kind of like in measuring, when you're trying to find a proportion of an object, you look at some of the things around the object, you're getting stuck on the actual object itself. With value, especially with reflected light, looking at the values around an area can help you determine the actual value of one specific area.
So this lesson is all about erasing. What's the matter?
It's all about how light works. The comparison of light. Yeah, you're just using erasing right now to achieve that. In a few weeks, we're going to use tone paper and a white pencil. Black pencil to achieve it. But things I'm talking about now apply to painting, drawing, any type of drawing that they're doing pastels. It relates to that. If you're doing computer art and animation, cartoons, light logic still applies. I was actually watching South Park last night, and I saw, they had things that were. I looked at parts of it, and I was like, yeah, that goes along with the basic rules of light logic.
Either shade it's being lit by ultimate light, isn't it?
No, I think they used to cut construction paper out and scan it in.
As the light?
I don't know if they've changed. I think they've changed the way they animate it now, but. I think they did do an animated program or animated show of some cartoon that was like that. But anyway, right now I don't really have any detail in, but I have clarity of where my lights are, where my shadows are, and what the big shapes I'm dealing with are going to be. Does that make sense? So this is your objective. I want to say, starting probably the end of the day and into Wednesday, have this be your objective. Do not rush to wanting to do details. That'll probably come on Wednesday. So I think real quick we'll take a 5-minute break. Actually, why don't we take a 10-minute break? We'll come back and I'm going to work up a certain area just so you can see how it changes from generalized observation to more specific. Right? Does anybody have any questions at this stage?
Should we do this on the Strathmore pencil paper?
You can do it on a Strathmore paper or Canson paper. White paper is fine. But make sure it's not that drawing pad paper. It's in the general sketch pad. Yeah, that won't really hold the trouble. No. You can get like the Canson paper, individual sheets. Yeah. I was on the board. I'll write it down again. All right. So now that I have my basic block-in done proportionately, I know where my lights and darks are, I know the general shapes of my lights and darks, I'm going to start to work the areas more specifically of halftone, reflected light, pitch shadow, foreshadow, and so on. So you can use anything for that mostly. You can use a straight ruler or whatever, as long as it doesn't bend a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work up the area that's right here, which is where most people would really get taken off course because it's the most complicated and detailed. And I'm going to go back and forth between a B carbon pencil, a 2B charcoal pencil. If you have a hard charcoal pencil, or an HB, that's fine too. There is no section in the drawing where you're going to go, okay, I'm done using charcoal pencil, now I'm going to only use carbon pencil, or vice versa. You're basically going to go back and forth. And by doing this, you're just going to get the experience of how they react. As far as when you make the decision of which one to use, which one not to use, that's going to come with experience. That's going to come with an observation of what needs to be lighter, what needs to be darker, what needs to be changed, and so on. So there's no formula to when you use it or when you don't use certain pencils. But I will say this, don't use the 6B and the 4B that's really, really dark, because if you still have a problem with being heavy-handed, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to make super dark marks, and then you're going to find out later that they're compressed charcoal, they're super dark, and you can't change it. So by starting with ones that are a little lighter, you still have some leeway on making corrections. So, right now I might do this a little bit later on. You can also do this with your thinking. You got a lot of coordination. Some people do that. Alright, so I can look all through here and see there's a good variety of light and dark, but obviously there's more variety in the edges than I've got here. I've got pretty specific, pretty pronounced hard edges everywhere. Some of them a little bit soft, but I want to refine the shape and refine the edges, because that's something you're going to have for your first assignment, which is going to be drawing drapery, a white or off-white drapery in full light and shadow. And if you look at any of these drapery setups, you'll notice there's some edges on the shadows that are hard, some edges in between, some edges that are soft. So I'm going to start thinking about that a little more. So I can see this needs to be changed a little bit. It's a little bit more of an angle. So this is a B carbon pencil. I'm just going to skim the paper at first, and I'll still erase out. So I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between a lot of things. If this was a painting, you'd kind of be thinking the same kind of methodology, but you end up with like 6 or 7 brushes in one hand and going back and forth between brushes. So. Find you're off still in proportions, change it. In reference to the question of, well, what happens if I start pulling up some of the charcoal, as you start to use compressed pencils and start to refine a little bit more, I don't want to say it makes it more the area more permanent, but it starts to get a little more permanent, in the sense it's a little more difficult to erase. So. Value in that area of the eye is there's not much change in that value that I'm seeing from this perspective. It's not super dark, but there's not a ton of reflected light in that area right now, given that the light's falling from above and the way things positioned. Could be if I change the position of the light. Over some of these smaller lines of connection there. And here, getting really close, I see a little strip of light, but really close in light and dark, so for the time being I'm not going to put a hard line right there. So to flatten it out. A little too dark. So you might run into a situation where, for some reason, the area of a shadow is too dark and you need to erase out to get the reflected light. There's something wrong with erasing back into the shadow to adjust the reflected light, as long as you're keeping it within context that it's not getting too light. So if you have to erase it out and then draw it back down a little bit more and kind of go back and forth to make an adjustment in the shadow, that's fine. Just think about it in terms of the end product, where it's going to eventually be. There I have some halftone. I'm thinking about my pencil in the same way I was thinking about the eraser, in the sense that it's like a chisel that I'm sculpting with. That's something you'll get out of the master copy assignment if you pick up Michelangelo to copy. You'll notice all of his marks on his drawings are drawn like he's a sculptor. Every mark is like actually drawing over a real dimensional form, like it's an actual chisel. And if you compare it to his unfinished sculptures, you can see the relation.